You were never shown how to command your own energy. This was not an oversight. From the first words you learned, you were steered away from your innate power, instructed to be still, to conform, and to place your faith in systems that were blind to your inner universe. You were taught that power was an external force, something found in electrical currents, engines, or bank accounts, but never within your own breath, your own thought, your own focused will. The ancients, however, knew differently. Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, time, and the keeper of hidden arts, left behind more than just legends. He left a framework, a precise methodology said to unlock the subtle architecture that governs all of creation. This is energy, not as a poetic concept, but as a force you can direct with disciplined intention and conscious awareness. His teachings, long guarded by mystery schools and systematically suppressed by empires, described a reality where mind sculpts existence, frequency gives rise to form, and the human being is not a casualty of life, but its co-creator. There is a reason the masters of antiquity did not leave behind simple instruction manuals. They encoded their knowledge into myth, symbol, and sacred story. Thoth was not merely a character in a pantheon. He was seen as the very architect of wisdom. The Greeks identified him as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great. His name is etched upon the emerald tablets, and within these ancient texts lie the fragments of something far more concrete than myth. Something that reads like a technology of consciousness, a system for operating not just with energy, but as energy. This was never about religion or blind worship. It was about alignment. The teachings of Thoth did not demand your belief. They invited you to remember a forgotten truth: that the universe, at its most fundamental level, is not built of matter, but of motion. Vibration is the source of all things. The one who learns to direct this vibration becomes a master of their reality, not a slave to it. The hermetic law, all is mind, was not a piece of philosophical comfort. It was a literal declaration. Everything originates in the mind. Every form, every field, every event is first given shape by thought. Consciousness is not a mere byproduct of your brain. It is the very source of existence. Your thoughts are not weightless or empty. They are blueprints, leaving their imprint on the vast field of reality. Thoth's method begins right here, not with external ceremonies or incantations, but with your own inner awareness. In his tradition, thought was understood as a frequency, intention as a tangible force, and emotion as the wave that carries them. Together, these three elements form a trinity capable of influencing the energetic fields both within your body and in the space around you. This was never a metaphor. It was mechanics. You are a living transmitter, whether you are aware of it or not. The only question is, are you broadcasting with purpose? The ancients understood that focused thought, pure and undiluted by the static of fear or doubt, could shift the very energetic structure of space. They knew that matter is simply energy condensed to a slower vibration, and that this energy responds to the directive of the mind. This is not a forgotten fantasy. It is a reality now being echoed by modern discoveries in quantum mechanics, cymatics, and bioenergetics. The double-slit experiment demonstrated that the simple act of conscious observation fundamentally alters outcomes at the quantum level. Cymatics provides visual proof that frequency organizes matter into geometric patterns. And studies in biofield science are confirming that the human body radiates a measurable electromagnetic signature that changes in direct response to thought and emotion. But this is the part you were never meant to put together. You are conditioned not only to forget this knowledge, but to ridicule it, to label it as pseudoscience, as mysticism, as irrelevant. This was not because it lacked truth, but because it contained too much. The more precise and accurate these ancient systems proved to be, the more aggressively they were concealed. The institutions that govern modern thought do not fear superstition, they fear precision. And the technique of Thoth was, above all else, precise. This blueprint was not meant to be followed with blind faith. It was designed to be remembered, and as you begin to remember, the world you once perceived as solid and fixed will start to soften. Your thoughts will no longer feel random. Your breath will feel less like an automatic function and more like a directed current. Your body will cease to feel like a mere container and will reveal itself as a sophisticated receiver. The way you speak, the way you move, and the way you channel your awareness, all of these will begin to reveal their true purpose, to command energy. You will stop asking for your life to change and will start to realize that you are the one changing it. Why was this knowledge so carefully hidden? Why were the teachings of Thoth sealed away in symbols and layers of secrecy? It was not to keep them from you, but to protect them from being misused. In the wrong hands, power becomes a tool for control. In the right hands, it is the key to liberation. This is why the initiates of old were rigorously tested before they were given the teachings, not to create an exclusive club, but to ensure they were ready for the responsibility. And now, that same knowledge is rising to the surface again. Not in ancient temples or on stone tablets, but in your own remembering. You are not discovering something new. You are uncovering what was yours all along. What if your thoughts were never private? What if, with every worry, every hope, every fear, and every dream, you were broadcasting a signal into the very fabric of reality? You have been trained to see thought as an invisible, abstract process, something that occurs in a hidden space between your neurons, contained, isolated, and without consequence. But thought is energy, and energy, by its very nature, must move, vibrate, and interact with the field it occupies. When Thoth declared that all is mind, he was not offering poetry. He was revealing the source code of existence. Every single thought you generate carries a specific frequency. The quality and power of that frequency are determined by your emotional state, your degree of focus, and the underlying beliefs running in your subconscious. A fleeting thought saturated with fear vibrates at a low, chaotic, and weak frequency. But a thought that is concentrated, fused with a calm and unwavering certainty, vibrates with coherence and has the power to influence the electromagnetic field around you. You are not merely thinking within the confines of your skull. You are generating subtle yet real distortions in the energetic field that envelops your body, what modern science is now beginning to call the biofield. Your mind does not stop at your skin. It radiates outward. This is not mysticism, it is measurable reality. EEG scans show how brainwave frequencies change in response to your thoughts and states of consciousness. Heart rate variability studies reveal how coherent emotional states, like gratitude and clarity, directly impact the heart's powerful electromagnetic rhythm. That rhythm, in turn, sends signals back to the brain, creating a continuous feedback loop. Thought influences feeling. Feeling influences your energy field. Your energy field influences your thought. When these elements are brought into alignment, your internal system achieves a state of resonance, and your ability to influence the external world grows exponentially. This is the knowledge Thoth possessed. This is the understanding that was systematically stripped from modern education. which instead prioritized memorization and the pursuit of external validation. The ancients may not have had our modern machines, but they had the power of deep observation. They understood that when a person thought with clarity and pure intention, their very presence could alter their environment. Plants would grow with more vitality. Illnesses could shift. The very energy of a space would feel different. The great temples were constructed not merely as places for worship, but as resonant amplifiers of frequency. Every column, every angle, every chamber was engineered to manipulate energy. The sound chambers in Egypt were not just for creating echoes, they were for tuning the human instrument. And what was being tuned? You. The most powerful instrument of all was not made of stone or built with sacred geometry. It was the human system itself, a complex, energetic organism capable of both transmitting and receiving vibrational information. Your breath is what modulates this system. Your voice is what projects its frequency. Your intention is what gives it direction. When you learn to bring these components into alignment, your thoughts cease to be passive observers and become precision instruments. They become tools that, when focused, can affect more than just your mood. They have the potential to shift probability itself. You have been conditioned to treat your inner world as a mere side effect of your life. In truth, it is the point of origin. Every outcome you have ever experienced began as an energetic pattern of thought and emotion. Whether you were conscious of it or not, you did not simply arrive where you are by chance. You projected, repeated, and reinforced a frequency that was a perfect match for your circumstances. Thoth's technique was never about magic. It was about mastery. It was about gaining conscious control over the internal frequency generator that you have been taught to ignore. And that, ultimately, is what makes this knowledge so dangerous to the established order. A person who understands that their own thoughts shape their world becomes a threat, not to others, but to the systems that thrive on human passivity. When you begin to consciously direct your own attention, energy invariably follows. And when energy follows, matter itself must eventually rearrange. This process does not happen instantaneously. This is not a fantasy, but it does happen inevitably. Energy moves first. Form follows second. That is the law. So when Thoth spoke of the mind as the true medium of creation, he was handing you the one manual that no one else wanted you to read. He was telling you that to know yourself is to know the very levers of the universe. This is not because you are meant to control the world, but because you are meant to tune yourself to its hidden harmonies. And when the instrument is finally in tune, the song of your life begins to change. You were born with a raw, unfiltered awareness. As a child, you were sensitive, perceptive, and deeply connected. You felt the world more than you analyzed it. You could walk into a room and immediately sense the tension before a single word was spoken. You would stare at a beam of sunlight, captivated by the way it illuminated dancing dust particles. You imagined worlds, spoke to the invisible, and saw things that were undeniably real to you. That was not childish fantasy. That was pure perception before you were taught to build walls around it. You had not yet learned to block the signals, to decide which of your senses were valid and which were to be dismissed as nonsense. But the system was patient. It didn't need to engage in a direct fight with your awareness. It just needed time. Then came school, not the kind that fosters learning, but the kind that enforces conditioning. You were taught to be still, to speak only when called upon, to adhere to a rigid schedule, and to silence the vibrant world within. Creativity was relegated to a specific class, not recognized as a fundamental state of being. Your natural curiosity was often treated as a disruption. You stopped asking the deep why questions. You stopped listening to the wisdom of your body. A bell dictated when you were to think, when you were to move, and when you were to stop. The true lessons were not in mathematics or language. They were in obedience and rhythm. Your very nervous system was being trained to respond to external commands. And what about energy? It was never part of the curriculum. Not the kind of energy we are discussing. Yes, they taught you about fossil fuels and electrical grids, but not about the bioelectric field of your own body. Not about the powerful electromagnetic frequency generated by your heart. Not about how your breath could modulate your entire energy field. They never told you that stillness could sharpen your perception, or that your focused intention carried a real vibrational impact. That kind of energy was deliberately omitted, because if you had learned how to direct your own energy, you would not be so easy to direct. Instead, the system systematically replaced your inner awareness with external noise. After school, you graduated to media. Cartoons with flashing lights, rapid-fire edits, and later, social media algorithms, all meticulously designed to hijack your focus and scatter your attention. You were never taught how to govern your own thoughts, but you were endlessly fed millions of images designed to govern them for you. Consumerism was elevated to the level of culture. You were taught to find fulfillment in what you could purchase, not in what you could feel. You were not taught to breathe. You were taught to scroll. Let's be perfectly clear. This is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. A person who is trained to ignore their own energy will always feel an internal void, a sense that something is missing. And that void, that subtle, persistent ache, is precisely what drives you to consume more, to obey more, and to question less. You stop looking inward for answers and begin searching for them in the external world, never realizing that your own frequency has been deliberately hijacked. This is the subtle genius of the system. It doesn't need to put you in physical chains when it can simply scramble your signal. Think about it. Why is meditation considered a luxury instead of a fundamental life skill? Why is breathwork labeled alternative when it is the very foundation of your nervous system's health? Why are the most powerful and effective energetic practices either hidden behind spiritual cliches or buried under layers of cultural stereotypes? It's because they work. They do not require apps, prescriptions, or monthly subscriptions. They cannot be monetized, patented, or taxed. And, most threateningly for those in power, they make you self-sufficient. A person who knows how to regulate their own energy cannot be easily manipulated by fear. A person who understands that their thoughts have a tangible effect on their environment will not subscribe to the lie of helplessness. A person who is tuned into their own frequency can feel the truth behind spoken words and the deceit hidden behind polished smiles. That is dangerous. Not because it leads to open rebellion, but because it leads to personal sovereignty. You become the author of your own experience. The pre-written script no longer has power over you, so when you encounter people who dismiss this knowledge as woo-woo or unscientific, understand where that programmed reaction originates. It comes from years of meticulous training. It is the result of being taught that anything invisible is imaginary, that only the physical can be real, and that true expertise always resides outside of you. But you do not need anyone's permission to access what is already yours. What you need is remembrance. You need to engage in a process of unlearning. You need to reclaim the subtle, powerful awareness that the system worked so diligently to dull. Because here is the undeniable truth. The energy has always been there. It never vanished. You were simply trained to stop feeling it. The world you perceive is not the world as it truly is. It is the world as you have been conditioned to see it. And hidden within the fragmented teachings of the ancients is a clear map leading out of that conditioned illusion. The hermetic texts, attributed to Thoth under his Greek title of Hermes Trismegistus, were never intended to be religious documents. They were coded blueprints, precise instructions for decoding the nature of reality itself. But to the untrained eye, they appear as mere poetry. To the indoctrinated mind, they seem to be nothing more than mysticism. That was always the point. As above, so below, as within, so without. You have undoubtedly heard this phrase, perhaps even quoted it, but have you ever truly felt the weight of what it means? It is not just a philosophical reflection, it is a fundamental equation, a law of existence. What manifests in the visible world is a direct reflection of what is occurring in the unseen. The universe is not a chaotic collection of separate parts. It is a multi-layered mirror. Your external reality mirrors your internal frequency. If you change one, the other must inevitably follow. And yet, this principle is never taught in a science class. No one explains that your inner state is a causal force. Instead, you are taught to treat the symptoms, to fix the outcomes, to react to the consequences. But the wisdom of Thoth instructs you to start upstream. It tells you to start within. The Kybalion, one of the most essential hermetic texts, lays out 7 universal principles, all of which stem from one single foundational truth. The universe is mental. Not in a metaphorical way, but in a literal, functional one. All is mind. This means that everything you see around you is being shaped by consciousness, not just your own, but the collective, cosmic, universal mind. This is not some ego-driven fantasy of creation. It is a model of participatory alignment. When you learn to tune your personal mind to these larger patterns through disciplined thought, conscious breath, and clear intent, you no longer have to fight against the current of life. You begin to steer with it. If you look closely at the ancient temples and mystery schools, you will see the same patterns repeated across civilizations. Sacred geometry, vibrational patterns, symbols of light and frequency. These were not mere aesthetic choices. They were advanced technologies. Sacred geometry was not decoration. It was a form of energetic architecture. Every angle, every ratio, and every proportion was meticulously chosen to resonate with the human body's energy field, to amplify it, and to create a state of coherence between the structure and the person standing within it. These temples were not built to impress distant gods. They were built to tune human beings. Even the cryptic language of alchemy, transmutation, purification, the turning of lead into inner gold, was never about literal metallurgy. It was a coded metaphor for turning the dense, unconscious human into the luminous, aware one. It was the science of refining your own energy through the force of your will, of balancing the inherent polarities within your being, and of becoming a conscious vessel for the divine current of life. That divine force was not separate. It was the very frequency of existence itself, accessible through disciplined awareness and precise vibrational alignment. All of this knowledge was hidden in plain sight, not because it was too complex to be understood, but because it was too powerful to be left unguarded. If knowledge is power, then hermetic wisdom is the source code for self-mastery, and self-mastery is the ultimate threat to dependency. If you no longer require external permission to be well, if you no longer rely on outside validation for your sense of meaning, if you can generate clarity, strength, and connection from within, then what can they possibly sell you? What can they control? This is why these teachings were systematically diluted, deliberately obscured, and eventually ridiculed. It is why a text like the Kybalion is considered fringe, while conformity is called education. But the truth does not simply vanish. It waits. It weaves itself into symbols, hides behind common phrases, and patiently awaits the eyes that are ready to see again. And if you have come this far in this transmission, you are already beginning to remember. Deep down, part of you knows that this is not new information. It is ancient truth rising to the surface, feeling familiar, not because you have read it before, but because it was always there, encoded into your body, your breath, and your inner knowing. You do not need to understand every symbol or memorize every law. You simply need to feel what is real. And when you do, the hermetic principles cease to be abstract theories. They become the very lens through which you perceive everything. You stop reacting to the events of your life and begin to read them. The chaos reveals its underlying rhythm. The fear becomes a signal, and you finally realize that Thoth did not come to mystify the world. He came to show you how to read its hidden language. Science, at its purest, is the pursuit of truth. But when that truth begins to challenge the foundations of control, it is often quietly redirected, sanitized, categorized, and discredited. You were taught that anything ancient must be unscientific, that if a thing cannot be measured by current tools, it cannot be real. But what happens when modern science begins to validate the very principles that were once dismissed as primitive mysticism? Suddenly, the fabricated line between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge discovery starts to dissolve. What was once called magic begins to look a great deal like a forgotten science. Quantum physics does not contradict hermetic law. It confirms it. The double-slit experiment provides undeniable proof that the simple act of observation changes the behavior of subatomic particles. In other words, the presence of consciousness alters the outcome of reality. That is not philosophy. That is a measurable, repeatable phenomenon. The observer effect is not a mere theory. It is a doorway. It tells us that the mind does not just passively experience matter. It actively interacts with it. And what Thoth declared thousands of years ago, that thought shapes form, is now being echoed by physicists, even if they often hesitate to say it so plainly. Scalar energy is another critical thread that bridges this ancient knowledge with modern science. Unlike traditional electromagnetic fields, scalar energy does not move in waves. It is non-linear, exists at the 0 point, and is capable of penetrating solid matter without losing strength. Does that sound familiar? This is precisely the kind of energy that Thoth described. A force that exists beyond the visible spectrum, beyond the constraints of space and time, and is directly influenced by intention and alignment. It is the energy of the void, the fundamental field that responds not to machinery, but to consciousness. The reason you do not hear about scalar energy in mainstream physics textbooks is not because it lacks potential, but because it possesses too much. Advanced weaponry has been theorized using its principles. Revolutionary healing devices have been patented based on it. And yet, you are never taught about it. Why? Because if energy can be influenced by thought, and if healing can occur through energetic coherence, and if the body is not merely physical but fundamentally vibrational, then the entire medical paradigm must change. Then the power structures built on disease, chemical dependency, and the suppression of natural healing start to collapse. And make no mistake, these systems are not designed to empower you. They are designed to perpetuate themselves. Empowered people do not just think differently, they live differently. They do not purchase what they do not need. They do not obey what does not resonate with their inner truth. They do not fear what they can understand. Even the field of cymatics, the study of how sound frequencies give shape to matter, shows us that vibration is not an abstract concept. It is the very basis of form. Sound creates structure. Certain frequencies produce perfect order, others produce chaos. When you speak, your words are not just sounds, they are potent vibrations. When you think, you are not just having an internal dialogue, you are shaping subtle energetic fields. The ancients used toning, chanting, specific breath work, and strategic silence to tune their own systems like fine instruments. They were not performing these rituals for spectacle. They were aligning their inner frequency with the greater cosmic field. Today, we label these practices as alternative. But there is nothing alternative about the truth, only about what has been forgotten. You see, the real division is not between science and spirituality. It is between open, honest inquiry and institutionalized control. True science is never afraid of what it does not yet understand. But corporate science, the science that is owned, funded, and filtered through the lens of profit, cannot afford to make discoveries that disrupt its profitable model. And it is their models that they protect, not the truth. Because the truth liberates, and liberation is bad for business. That is why a figure like Thoth, who taught that energy is a birthright and consciousness is the architect of form, was mythologized into obscurity. It is why vibrational medicine is often framed as a mere placebo effect, while chemical dependency is normalized as a solution. It is why you were taught that thinking is a passive activity and that matter is the dominant force in the universe. Because if the opposite were to be accepted as true, the entire hierarchy of control would collapse. The lab coat would become a tool, not a throne. The body would be seen as intelligent, not defective. The mind would be recognized as creative, not chaotic. But you do not need anyone's permission to recognize the principle of resonance. You have already felt it. You have walked into rooms that felt heavy and oppressive for no apparent reason. You have met people whose very presence calmed you before they even spoke a word. You have listened to music that rearranged your emotional state in a matter of seconds. You have had thoughts that seemed to shift the entire mood of your day. These are not coincidences. They are clues. They are the echoes of a truth that predates all of our modern systems. A truth that says energy is real, vibration is law, and consciousness is the interface. And when science finally stops protecting its outdated models and begins to follow its own data to its logical conclusion, it will rediscover what the ancients already knew. Until that day comes, the responsibility of remembering falls to you. The most dangerous knowledge is always concealed in symbols, not because the knowledge itself is vague, but because the symbols protect the unready from misinterpreting it. The technique of Thoth, often referenced in fragments across hermetic texts and the lore of mystery schools, was never passed down as a simple step-by-step guide. It was encoded in geometry, embedded in ritual, whispered through metaphor, and fiercely guarded for one singular reason. It worked. Not as a poetic inspiration, not as a moral framework, but as a functional method for controlling your own energy consciously, intentionally, and with a clear purpose. The ancients never separated the body from the spirit or the mind from the breath. They viewed the human being as a single, continuous system, at once electrical, magnetic, vibrational, and conscious. Thoth's system operated within this holistic framework. It was not a matter of faith, it was a matter of alignment. You, yourself, became the instrument. And when you learned how to tune that instrument with precision, you could begin to interact with the fundamental field that gives shape to all form. In modern language, you could learn to alter the code. The process always began with silence. Not the mere absence of noise, but the absence of internal and external interference. The body had to be brought to stillness. The breath had to be unforced and rhythmic, and the mind had to be clear, not emptied, but consciously directed. The ancients did not suppress thought, they mastered it. The first layer of this technique was about achieving coherence. If your mind and body are in conflict, your energy field becomes scattered. If your emotions are in a state of reaction, your signal is unstable. Therefore, the first phase was always internal alignment, bringing your breath, your awareness, and your emotional state into perfect synchrony. This was not a spiritual exercise. It was preparation, like tuning the strings of an instrument before you attempt to play music. Then came the element of intention. This was not about vague wishing or reciting hollow affirmations. Intention, in the hermetic sense, meant concentrated will, a single, focused frequency of thought, held without any underlying contradiction. Emotion was not just present, it was the power source. You did not just visualize an outcome, you felt it into being. You generated a coherent inner experience so powerful and real that your energy field began to respond as if it had already happened. The ancients knew that reality bends first in the unseen realms. Voice and breath were the primary tools of projection. Chanting was not a random act. It was a method for vibrating the physical body, for activating internal frequencies that could then be aligned with the greater field. The breath modulated the nervous system, grounding the desired frequency into physical form. Every inhale was a yi, conscious drawing in of energy. Every exhale was a conscious direction of that energy. When harmonized with focused thought and congruent feeling, this process became a powerful transmission, subtle yet far from weak. And what was this technique ultimately used for? It was not for control in the way the modern mind interprets it. It was not for manipulating others. It was used to influence the self, the immediate environment, and the field of probabilities around you. Health, clarity, emotional mastery, and even the magnetism that draws specific people or events into your life. These were not things left to the whims of fate. They were states that could be adjusted, tuned, and directed by those who had learned the method. This was not a process that was always perfect or infallible, but it was consistent enough that the tradition endured for thousands of years. Of course, the written records we have are fragmented. Most of the original initiations were oral, ritualistic, and experiential. But the remnants that have survived all point to the same core principle. The energetic field around you is programmable, and you, in your natural, aligned state, are the programmer. This is why Thoth's technique has been so heavily mythologized. Because if you see it as a mere legend, you will never attempt to apply it. If you dismiss it as ancient fantasy, you will never remember what your own body already intuitively knows. Even today, aspects of this ancient method are being rediscovered under different names. Neuroscience, bioenergetics, breathwork, vibrational healing. But they are often disconnected from their original, profound context. They are frequently reduced to life hacks or wellness trends. The truth is, this was never about achieving temporary states of calm. It was about profound and lasting transformation. It was about remembering how to consciously interface with the very building blocks of reality and how to do so with responsibility. Because the field always responds. Not to what you say, but to what you hold, to what you believe, and to what you emit with consistency. The technique of Thoth was never about performing. It was about becoming. And once you become coherent, focused, and aligned, the external world has no choice but to reflect it. This is not mysticism. It is the mechanics of mind and energy, hidden for centuries, now waiting to be lived once again. Knowledge is not always hidden in darkness. Sometimes it is hidden in plain sight, buried under layers of ridicule, rebranded as fantasy, or distorted into harmless entertainment. This is precisely what happened to the teachings of Thoth. They were not completely burned or lost. They were trivialized. They were stripped of their original context, dressed up in the clothing of mythology, and neatly shelved in the category of legend. Because if you can mythologize something for long enough, people will stop looking at it as a functional system and start seeing it as just another story. And no one tries to live a story. They simply listen, nod, and then forget. That was always the point. The technique we have been unpacking was not forbidden because it was false. It was forbidden because it made control more difficult. It bypassed the need for institutions. It did not require temples, clergy, or official certifications. It did not ask for anyone's permission. It taught that power, real power, begins in the quiet sanctuary of your own mind. It revealed that reality bends to focused energy. It showed that sovereignty is not something granted by external systems. It is something that is remembered from within. And for those who seek to maintain control, nothing is more dangerous than a population that remembers. Systems of control, by their very nature, require disconnection. If you believe your thoughts are private, passive, and ultimately powerless, you will always look outside of yourself for any meaningful change. If you believe your body is a random assembly of biological parts, you will surrender the authority over your own health to someone with a license. If you believe your emotions are irrational and burdensome, you will repress them until they inevitably sabotage your inner harmony. The moment you forget that every part of your being is energetic, intelligent, and programmable, you become infinitely easier to manage. And let's be clear, this suppression was not accidental. When great empires rose, they did so not just by conquering territory, but by conquering knowledge. The ancient mystery schools did not just teach rituals, they preserved a sophisticated vibrational science. The temples of Egypt, the initiations in ancient Greece, the Vedic breath practices in India, these were all part of a vast, interconnected network of energetic understanding. It was not a matter of belief. It was a matter of direct, experiential understanding. These cultures did not worship nature. They studied it, harmonized with it, and mirrored its fundamental principles in their own internal and external systems. But as power began to consolidate, this decentralized wisdom became a direct threat. Rome did not just burn libraries, it replaced their knowledge with rigid doctrine. Organized religion did not just reinterpret ancient symbols, it rebranded them as sinful. The feminine principles of intuition, receptivity, and inner knowing were systematically suppressed. The masculine principles of domination, control, and hierarchy were glorified, and suddenly energy work became heresy. Inner sovereignty became rebellion, silence became suspicious, ritual became blasphemy, and the people forgot. But forgetting does not mean the knowledge was lost. It means it was stored away, encoded into symbols, woven into stories, and built into architecture. It survived in whispers, passed down through hidden lineages, and carried forward in dreams. And now, In this age of information, it is finally resurfacing. Not because it is trendy, but because something within us, as a collective, is ready for it again. We are ready to stop outsourcing our power. We are ready to stop numbing our instincts. We are ready to stop waiting for external change and start generating it from within. Still, the resistance remains. Mainstream science often ignores the energetic field. The education system trains you to memorize, not to remember. The media keeps you overstimulated, undernourished, and emotionally reactive. Every system you interact with on a daily basis has been designed to keep your personal frequency locked in survival mode, low, scattered, and predictable. Because people who are stuck in survival do not innovate, they do not question, they do not wake up. But a profound shift is happening. It is quiet, steady, and undeniable. People are beginning to feel what cannot be measured. They are sensing a deep dissonance in places where they used to find comfort. They are questioning the narratives that once felt absolute. And they are discovering that the very thing they were taught to dismiss, their inner sense, their energy, their alignment, is the one thing that changes everything. This is why the technique was forbidden, not because it doesn't work, but because it does. And when you apply it, when you align your mind, your breath, and your attention, you stop participating in the old story. You cease to be a passive node in someone else's program. You begin to create your own, not with force, but with frequency, not by escaping the world, but by retuning how you move through it. The truth was never lost, it was only silenced. But silence, like stillness, is just waiting to be heard again. At some point on this path, the question inevitably shifts from, "Is this real?" to, "Why did I ever believe it wasn't?" That transformation does not come from external proof, from charts, or from academic credentials. It comes from direct experience. It comes from the moment you feel that subtle, internal click. When the noise of the world fades, your breath deepens, and you realize you are not just a passive observer of life. You are actively generating it, not through brute force, but through alignment, through clarity, through a presence so still and focused that it begins to pull reality toward it. That is when the act of remembering becomes undeniable. That is when you stop looking for external magic and start moving like you are the magic. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about shedding everything that was never truly you. The programmed doubt, the conditioned fear, the inherited shame that was built around your own power. You do not need to become enlightened to use energy. You already are energy. The only distinction between someone who consciously influences the energetic field and someone who does not is awareness. The field is always listening. The only question is whether you are speaking to it deliberately or broadcasting unconsciously. Reclaiming your power begins with this radical acceptance. You have always possessed it. The subtle sensations you once dismissed, the gut feelings, the flashes of synchronicity, the moments of profound stillness that seemed to stretch time, were not anomalies. They were your true signal, peeking through the static. The system trained you to label that intuition as coincidence, that clarity as a fluke, and that alignment as mere luck. But what if that is your default state? What if you have simply been trained to tune it out? When you consciously reclaim that channel, everything begins to change. Not instantly, not always dramatically, but with a deep and consistent momentum. The way you speak shifts because you become aware of its vibration. The way you think becomes more intentional because you understand that thought is a form of transmission. The way you move through the world becomes less reactive and more resonant. And people feel it. They may not know what is different about you, but they will respond to your coherence. You become a living contradiction to the world's programming, not by preaching, but simply by being. You are calm when others are frantic. You are clear when others are lost. You are empowered without needing to overpower anyone. That is the silent revolution. One coherent individual radiates more influence than 100 scattered ones. Not because they control others, but because they have ceased to be controlled by themselves. You do not need to master every ancient technique to begin this process. You simply need to get quiet enough to listen, to breathe with intention, to observe your own mind without reacting, and to think in terms of frequencies, not just concepts. The mind often craves complexity. The field responds to simplicity. It values alignment over effort, awareness over knowledge, and presence over performance. If there has ever been a time to begin, it is now, because while you are remembering, others are, too. There is a ripple moving through the collective consciousness. It is not loud, but it is potent. People are turning off the distractions, questioning the norms, and feeling the pressure of a reality that no longer fits. That pressure is not the end. It is the birth canal. The choice is whether you will resist it or breathe with it, whether you will numb it or listen to it, whether you will keep waiting for someone else to change the world or finally remember that you are the very frequency it has been waiting for. This is not a matter of belief. It is a matter of resonance. If this truth stirs something deep within you, do not let it fade. Do not scroll past it. Sit with it. Ask yourself, what if I have been this powerful the entire time? And then watch what answers come. Not from the outside, but from the field you have always been a part of. Every ancient tradition, every mystic teaching, and every hidden scroll that survived the fires of time, whether it was buried, banned, or burned, says the same thing, in different words. You are the vessel. You are the conductor. You are the source. What Thoth taught was not myth. It was memory. It was not fiction. It was function. It was a reminder that energy is not something you use. It is something you are. To forget that is to live as a shadow in your own life. But to remember, to truly remember, is to step out of the role you were assigned and become the creator you were always meant to be. We live in a world where knowing this makes you dangerous, not because you will cause harm, but because you will stop being controlled. A society that profits from your doubt cannot survive your awareness. That is why the systems of power work so diligently to keep you numb. It is why schools rarely teach stillness, why science strips the sacred from its equations, and why media replaces wisdom with noise. Because when you see clearly, truly see, no one can sell you what you already possess. No one can own what you have reclaimed, and what you are reclaiming now is more than just an idea. It is a birthright. Your ability to focus your intent, to shift your inner frequency, and to create change both inside and out is not a gift reserved for monks, mystics, or chosen ones. It is for you. It always has been. But power without clarity leads to chaos. That is why teachings like those of Thoth were once reserved for the initiated, those who had proven they would use this power with purpose, not with ego. This was not because the knowledge itself was dangerous, but because the untrained mind is. This is not about achieving perfection. It is about engaging in a dedicated practice. Energy does not need your belief to function. It responds to your attention, your consistency, and your presence. You can start right now, wherever you are. No altar is needed, only your awareness, your breath, and your intention. Every moment is an invitation to align, to shift your internal state before you react to the external one, to listen deeply before you speak, and to charge your words with purpose rather than with noise. You will begin to notice the subtle shifts first. People will treat you differently without knowing why. You will experience random synchronicities. You will find more clarity in the midst of chaos. But soon, the changes will grow. Your health may improve. Ideas will come faster. Your emotions will settle. You will start to navigate the world as if it is responding to you, because it is. Not as a master over it, but as a conscious participant within it. The veil lifts. The pre-written script loses its grip. And for the first time, you will feel the profound difference between merely existing and truly being alive. This journey is not meant to be walked alone. While the awakening begins individually, its true power lies in the collective. That is why the systems in place keep us divided, distracted, suspicious, and isolated. Because when awakened individuals unite, the system of control no longer holds. When we stop arguing over illusions and start synchronizing in truth, a new frequency emerges, one that cannot be silenced, bought, or broken. It amplifies, it spreads, and it reshapes reality from the inside out. If you have made it this far, you already know that this is not just content. It is a form of initiation. This knowledge was hidden not because it was false, but because it was too real, too liberating, and too powerful. The time for secrecy is over. The scrolls have been unrolled. The walls of the old world are cracking, and the voice that has been whispering in your chest since childhood is growing louder. It is time to stop waiting for someone else to activate you. You are the activation. You are the technique. You are the field. And every step you take from here is yours to shape. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."